arms work just as hard as our legs. Fire up your triceps.
Your hips are dipping, always the option to come down to the knee.
Not as a weakness, but as a sense of strength, something that's empowering.
Namaste.
Hi yogis, so I am here with another short video. If you saw my seated heart opening and chest stretching video, you probably know why I'm doing this. I asked for requests on Patreon, and one of the requests was things that you can kind of do just a pose at a time on your own that aren't necessarily like let's sit down and do 15 minutes or an hour of yoga. So these are things, especially some of you said, you know, I sit a lot during the day, either in the car, or at my desk, or things like that. So things you can do from your chair, things you can do while you're seated, or you know, even if you're just at home sitting on the couch and you just feel like you need to move your body a little bit, things that you can do to help with that. So first one we'll do is a little bit more of a hip stretch. Again, check out the heart and shoulder one if you need more heart and shoulders, but this is kind of lower half and low back focused. A seated figure 4 stretch. So with that seated figure 4 stretch, you're just going to cross one of your ankles over your thigh. It doesn't really matter which one you start with. You'll flex your toes towards your knee that's lifted up. So you want to try to keep your knee and your ankle kind of in the same plane. If you're really tight and your knee's all the way up here, I mean, that's gonna happen for some of us. You're not doing it wrong, but instead of like folding forward or just really trying to force it, just working on maybe just stretching that knee down a little bit. Again, don't try to like crank the knee down to the ground, but just letting yourself breathe into just letting that hip relax so that the knee can relax a little bit. Eventually when our knee and our shin, or our knee and our ankle, the whole shin is kind of more parallel with the ground, then you can kind of start to fold forward a little bit. So the longer and flatter you can keep your back while you fold forward, the more intense you'll make the stretch. Those of us who are pretty flexible in our hips, and I tend to be a little bit more flexible in my hips. I wouldn't say I'm flexible generally at all, but if I'm flexible anywhere, it's probably my hips. So I don't feel a ton of stretch like this, and you might not either, even with your back pretty flat. So I have another alternative for you if you're in that group, but for a lot of us, that will already be a great stretch. So that's one thing to try. I'll do the more intense variation in a little bit. Another thing you can do while you're seated, some of us complained about low back hurting while we're sitting, you know, in the car or at our desks. Can't do this one in the car because you gotta drive, but if you're at a desk or when you can take a break, extending one leg out straight in front of you and then keeping again back long and flat and starting to fold towards your shin. You can grab onto your calf or you know wherever you can grab. Maybe we're grabbing above the knee too, but you'll start to get that hamstring to stretch a little bit. A lot of times our low back pain comes from tight hamstrings, and as you fold you'll also get a little bit of low back stretch too. So that's another thing you can try from a seat. Then getting up out of our chair. So this is something, again, we can try at work. We can kind of try, you know, if you take a break from gardening, whatever it is that you're doing, yogi squat. So sinking into the hips. Again, if we're super tight, could be what our yogi squat looks like. We might just be resting our forearms on our thighs, letting those hips stretch. Eventually sinking a little bit deeper to maybe where we can put our hands together at our chest, using that little bit of leverage into the arms, into the legs, to kind of stretch the hips open a little bit more. So this is a really nice one. You can add maybe a little bit of twist, a little bit of stretching through the chest too if you want to. And just kind of breathing into those hips. Then, other stretches we can do using our chair without sitting in it. So the more intense figure 4 that I mentioned. So if you're doing the crossing the ankle over the shin, folding forward seated, and it's just not doing anything for you, you can do the same thing with a chair or a counter, something that's kind of taller. This is probably the worst kind of chair that I could possibly demo on, but this is the only chair available to me at the studio. So you would cross, just like you would over your leg, your shin kind of parallel to the ground, and then starting to fold towards the shin. So feeling a much more intense stretch along the outer hip, and again flexing the toes towards the knee. Okay, so you could do this on a countertop, on a desktop, on the back of your couch, on your bed, something like that. It is going to be a little bit more intense stretch, so if doing it seated was already a little bit like for your hips, you're clenching your jaw, you weren't breathing, stick with the seated one. Okay. Again, with our chair or our prop. We can do a hip flexor stretch as well. So you can kind of stand one foot. It could be, on a stool, on a chair, whatever you have, and then just sinking into that hip. So you're stretching through the front side of the hip here, the hip flexor. So you're undoing when you're sitting, this whole thing contracts. It's all very short. So if you're able to counterbalance that with lengthening, with stretching, you're gonna undo some of that tightness in the hips from all the sitting that you've been doing. So if you can do that, and again, if you have stairs, a staircase, you could do this on the stairs, lifting one foot a few steps up above the other, and just stretching into both sides. And then the last thing, that was the last thing. All right, that was the last thing. We only had 5 stretches on this one. The other one, we have 6 stretches, so you guys got cheated on your hips. No, I'm kidding. But hopefully those are 5 things that you can remember to do when you're sitting for a long time. Again, just like I said in the other video, if you watched it, it's not about, okay, let's sit down and do 15, 20, an hour of yoga every single day. That's not what it's about. Most of us, realistically, probably aren't gonna do that. But if you can remember 1, 2, 3 go-to poses in areas that you know are problem areas for you, whether it's tight shoulders, tight hips, whatever it is, and just do those 1, 2, 3, 4 stretches every single day for, a minute, 2 minutes, whatever time you have, whatever time you can remember to do it, that's what's gonna make a difference in your body in the long run, rather than just doing one yoga class once a month because that's all you have time for. So go through those stretches, see what your body responds to, remember a couple of your favorites, and then try to incorporate them into your routine. So hopefully that helped. Have a great rest of your day, and go check out the other video if you haven't already. Namaste.